Hello and welcome to the Author Chat. Today it's myself, Nathan Burgoine, with Jeffrey Ricker and J. Marshall Freeman. We are going to be discussing, we're going to be discussing things with each other. Nominally, we'll be discussing Three Left Turns to Nowhere, which is our book of 3 novellas linked through the same town and similar circumstances and a little bit of magic. We'll get into that in a little bit. I am not your host. I just started speaking first. So I'm now going to make these other 2 gentlemen introduce themselves so that I can pause and take a sip of something to drink. Jeffrey.
Hello, my name is Jeffrey Ricker, and I wrote Roadside Assistance, which is the novella that kicks off our collection. J. Marshall.
I'm J. Marshall Freeman. I wrote the Scavenger Hunt, which is the center of the 3 pieces. And yeah, excited about this. I also have a novel coming out from Bold Strokes in May. Barnabas Bockright Saves the City. So we'll stay tuned for that.
I love the cover.
Yes.
Yes, it's it's same cover designer as Three Left Turns to Nowhere, Inkwell.
Ink Spiral Design.
Spiral Design
Yes.
in London, England, who does wonderful work.
He's brilliant. Yes, I've had him now for like 4 or 5 books, and I'm like, I'm not letting go.
We're keeping him. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing him.
And I wrote the 3rd book the 3rd novella that closes out the book, which is Hope Echoes. Funnily enough, we actually recorded something already that is going to go out eventually. So we actually had to sit down and think of whole new topics that we hadn't discussed. So when we say this is going to be a bit of a melange and grab bag, we're really not kidding. So I'm going to launch a question at these poor gentlemen. And I'm going to start with one of the little topics about the book, because we'll try to make the topics at least semi-relate to the book, I hope, because otherwise Sandy will come back online and smack us. But all 3 of our gentlemen are trying to get to Toronto from elsewhere in Ontario, and they all get trapped in the small town of Hopewell, Ontario. In my case, a tree falls down across the road, and in both of your cases, I believe it's car trouble. So the kids are stuck but they're on their way to a science fiction convention. Now, it's possible you've noticed I'm a nerd, but I wanted to find out if the others have gone to any cons in their lives. Obviously, I think we've all been to literary conventions, because I think I've seen you all at literary conventions, but what about other flavors of conventions?
Oh yeah. Should I go? Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm a big comic book nerd, and I've been to many comic book conventions in my life, going all the way back to when I was a teenager. And in fact, if people know the artist George Perez, who was a great artist on Avengers and Teen Titans especially, I met him when I was like 16, and I have an Iron Man drawing from him that I recently found hiding in the basement. So yeah, I've been going to comic book conventions, and especially the amazing Toronto Toronto Comic Arts Festival, which is coming up in June this year. And it's sort of everything that isn't Marvel and DC of comics from all around the world. And so you meet amazing indie artists and some of your favorite artists who do like online comics and things. And I like that better than the more kind of commercial cons where you pay $60 to be photographed beside William Shatner or something.
Jeffrey?
Oh, well. Let's see. The first con I went to was when I was, I think I was probably about 16 years old, and it was a Doctor Who convention. And I met a lot of really great, weird people who were friends of mine for a long time. And I also got introduced to a bunch of music that I had never heard of as well. And this was back in 1985, 86. So, Doctor Who was showing on PBS. It was not like the multi-channel awesome thing that it is now. And from there, with those friends, I went to a bunch of other cons. There was one in Baltimore, there was one in Philadelphia. And then then I went to college and life happened. And I went to another one just with a friend of mine, because it was a very small event, James Doohan was going to be in town, and we were like, let's go see Scotty. And so we did, and we bought a lot of stuff and got autographs. And fast forward, I haven't been to one in a long time, but the last one I went to was one of those great big huge ones. Actually, it was Dragon Con in Atlanta, and I got my picture taken with Nichelle Nichols, which is sort of a high point of my life because she's amazing, and just being surrounded by a whole bunch of other nerds and people in costumes. It was just awesome.
I'm sorry if I made it sound like I was coming down on the big cons, because as soon as you started saying Michelle Nicole, I'm like, oh really?
Oh yeah, she was amazing. I mean, just like being near her, it was just incredible. And and there's a.
Did you keep your cool? No,
of course not. Are you kidding? Anybody who keeps their cool around her does not deserve to be around her. But there's actually a big Star Trek convention happening this weekend in Chicago that I wish I could be at, but real life and pandemic and stuff. And but Kate Mulgrew is there, but they just announced yesterday that they're going to do another one, and it's going to be in Seattle, and that's close to where I have family. So hope springs eternal, and hopefully Captain Janeway will be at that one too.
I have to say that's one thing that I'm listening to you tell your story. So anytime I managed to go to a con when I was a kid, it involved at least 4 or 5 hours of travel. One of these are one of the other ones in the States. Like all of the cons were either across the border or on the other side of the country. So yeah, I only got to do 3 or 4 when I was younger, but I made them count, and they were mostly Dungeons and Dragons or board games or super nerdy miniature stuff. Oh, I look back at myself and I kind of cringe, but I had such a good time. And just like you, Jeffrey, I met people that were my friends for years to come, which is amazing because I moved a lot. I didn't have a lot of same town for very long history growing up. So for me, when I made a friend that stuck around for more than a couple of moves, that was pretty big deal. I'm just glancing at the chat roll. I want to make sure if you guys have any questions for us, by all means, pop it into the Q&A box. If you do it on the scrolling chat, there's a good chance we'll miss it. I'll do my best to keep an eye on the chat, but it's really easy for stuff to scroll on by without noticing. Although someone wants to know, Jeffrey, if you're going to be a Doctor Who fan, where do you start?
Yes. Well, it depends on how far back you want to go, but I see that. Got to put my glasses on. Sorry. Let's see. Joni said to start with the episode Rose, which is the very first episode of the reboot that started in 2005, and that is a good place to start. I think it's good to start with the modern era of Doctor Who, because if you start with the earlier Doctor Who, it is, it was created in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, and the pacing is different. The special effect visual values are they're the equivalent of high school play special effects, which is to say that high school plays are awesome, but this was broadcast on the BBC to dozens of countries. And
another good jumping on place.
A little harder play to get into.
You can also jump on Peter Capaldi's last season, because I think they kind of deliberately made that sort of a rebooty thing. And his companion on that is this amazing black lesbian, and that's sort of. I think they designed that to be a decent jumping on place, because you kind of go on with her and figure out who he is.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
Let's just talk about Doctor Who for an hour.
Yeah, well.
We can. There's a reboot of Lost. I just saw that Jerry mentioned growing up on Lost in Space, and there's a reboot of that also, which is on Netflix. And I've only watched the first season, and I can't remember if I got all the way through the first season, but it's I have to go back and watch it, because I did really enjoy that.
We actually got through all 3 seasons and we loved it.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say is it doesn't let you it doesn't let you pause for breath. It's the kind of show where they never give you a moment to just be. It's a very action, high point, heavy beat, just like our novellas, he said, bringing it back to the topic at hand. Yeah, totally.
Thank you. Well done. And it's a good point, though, that they're all on their way to this con because it's about finding people who are like you. And the con means that to them.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah, there's very much a sort of theme of being lost and finding your way, and actually surprisingly finding things in this small town that gives them some of what they hoped they were going to get at the con anyway.
This is true.
Yeah.
All right, hit me with a question. It's only fair. I did it to you.
Okay.
You have one?
You do it.
Okay. I was wondering, because I work in a couple of different art forms. I've spent a lot of time making music and I've drawn some comics, not that well, but I've done it. And I'm wondering if you guys have worked in other art forms and the ways in which those influence your writing, or if you see a thing with your connection with your writing. Because I kind of see almost everything I do in the same way. I work kind of holographically, no matter what I do. If it's a piece of music, I've got the beats and the feeling of layering text on top of it, and then it all kind of comes together, not in order. And I realize sometimes when I'm writing that it almost has the same emotional feel as putting together a song or a larger piece of music. And I think even that the lessons of one kind of overlap with the lessons of the others. So I'm wondering if you guys have also have other artistic axes that you grind, and how they feel different or the same as writing.
So if people read my stuff, you will notice that I have a lot of drawers and painters in my characters, and that's on purpose, because definitely, especially when I was a teenager, I loved drawing and I absolutely adored painting. Painting is expensive. So that was a hobby that fell by the wayside when my family walked out. I could not do that and keep doing that, but I did keep up with scribbling and drawing, and I still doodle. So a lot of my characters still or are in the process of learning how to draw. I think actually even in this novella, Fielding is an artist, and that's one of the reasons he's going. Is he's got his sketch pad, he's constantly drawing all the time. He's a huge Catadora fan. He's all about the reboot of She-Ra. So I connect the idea of imagery and artistry with characters a lot. I'm not sure that my process for drawing or my process for painting really hits my writing. I think they feel like very different processes to me, but I will say that they often inspire the writing. So I've done quite a few short stories or quite a few novellas where I've taken something from art like Pentimento and turned that into a whole story or something to that effect. I also have I have some weird visual issues. So I find that goes into my art, and it does also tend to go into my writing a little bit. So I'm not sure which one's the cart and which one's the horse there.
It's been such a long time since I've picked up like a paintbrush or a sketch pad or anything, but like I did spend a lot of time drawing in high school and college, and did some painting, and it's sort of something that like it runs in the family. There are people who've been painters and drawers, and so it was always something that I would do, and at a certain point, I think I just gravitated more towards the words, and I haven't really done any art in a long time, and I'm not sure how they would how the process would stack up compared with writing. It's funny though, we just moved, and I've been unpacking things, and I found an old art pad with some pastel drawings in it, and so I mostly liked doing portraits, and so I could probably Yeah, I was gonna say I could probably, really, draw the most obvious line there, and that's probably true.
It's interesting that all three of us have done things in visual art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as music, it's just been play. I learned a little piano and I learned a little saxophone when I was in high school and college, and I tried picking up the piano again, but pianos are heavy and it's hard to pick them up. But really, yeah, exactly. But it is true. If you don't have access to a piano, it's kind of hard to keep up. So someday.
We have a question in the box. So, and I love this question. It's really nice and polite. Love you, Jerry. How do three guys with gray hair keep writing their youthful enough to do YA that doesn't sound like it was written by three guys with gray hair?
Oh, how kind of you.
I have an answer, Jerry. And first of all, how dare you?
Take it away, Jeffrey.
Oh, God. No, that was all my answer. It's funny because this is probably going to come up later on the YA panel, and because I had thought about this, I was like, how, why, huh? And part of it goes back to just reading it. I enjoy reading YA, and so I think that hopefully helps. It's early on when I was starting writing YA, The Unwanted was like 8 years ago, 10 years ago. I had more access to people who were in that age range because it was, nieces and nephews. And now I think if I succeed at it, it's perhaps because I've never completely grown up myself, and also I think because, well, if I'm honest, I teach creative writing at college, and so I have I have interactions with readers and people who have just sort of transitioned out of that age range, and I think that helps a little bit. They do introduce me to a lot of lingo that I wouldn't dare use, so because I would sound like I'm trying too hard.
They're goated books. That was one I just learned. I just learned goated the other day.
I don't think I know that one.
Goat is
greatest of all time.
Greatest of all time. So if you say like there was that thing on goated movie posters, which just means the greatest movie posters of all time. So I like how it becomes a transitive verb there.
Okay.
What about you, Jay Marshall?
Whether I'm writing a YA or adult or whatever, I like big metaphors. I like big canvases, the science fiction and fantasy or magic realism, much more than I do kitchen sink writing. And YA, A, lends itself to that. And B, I really like writing these characters who are at turning points in their life, who are just getting on their feet and discovering how powerful they are. So that's very moving to me. And I like to embody that time. I noticed that I also have a range of ages. I never have a book that's a bunch of teenagers who've managed to escape from the adults and never see them again. So I do tend to always have people of all different ages in my books, even though the YAs center the main characters, the teen main characters. And I like the connections between different generations. And I like to respect, I do respect sort of the lessons of every age. And my favorite way of thinking about aging is not that you move from age to age, but that you collect ages. Oh, yeah. So there's, there's still an 11-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 30-year-old, and a 40-year-old inside me. And I think each of them has value. And so it's fun to get in touch with those ones.
Yeah, I've never thought of life as being like, a trill. But I think that's true, because it's like one of the things that I try and or one of the things that, Jeffrey Dax, exactly, Jerry. one of the things that I, that I remember from that time in my life was just how big everything seemed and how monumental, like, because it was the first time for everything, and so, that experience was getting built up. That was when it started, and so I try and I just try and remember that when I'm writing, and I think to your point also, it is like it is YA writing and science fiction as well lend themselves to sort of thinking about big ideas and dealing with them, and especially if you combine them. So.
Yeah, I really love what you're saying about the idea of firsts and monumentals, because I do tend to think of YA as the genre of firsts. Like it's your first heartbreak, your first major friendship, your first something, For me, when I was writing exit plans for Teenage Freaks, I actually reached out to a whole bunch of high school GSAs because I knew that was going to be a big part of the book, was his friend group. And because I knew, frankly, like my experiences in high school did not involve a queer community, right? Like that wasn't something I had no access. I didn't even know the words, So I knew that was something that I would be, pulling out of my butt if I tried to just come up with it. So I actually did reach out to queer YA readers and also actual queer young adults in various high schools. That was very difficult because, of course, there's a lot of gatekeeping about who gets to go talk to kids, especially groups of queer kids, which is not surprising. But I managed to make it work, and I got some surveys, and I had some great discussions with some amazing young queerlings. But I think the biggest way I think I try to keep it, I don't know, in touch. I know I'm not in touch. I know I'm not in touch, but is that the now of things is very different than from when I was a 16 or 17-year-old. But the way that it is for queerlings when you're growing up and realizing that you're not like your folks and you're not like your siblings, and maybe you're not even like most of your friends, that I don't think has actually changed at all. They might have more language and they certainly have more representation out there than we ever had. But I think that feeling of like, oh crap, I'm different, and trying to put a handle on it, that hasn't gone away. I think that's very universal. And I mean, I also think that's universal to YA period. None of us felt like normal. But if you're looking at a queer YA lens, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. So in a way, I just had to do a little bit of time travel and then a bunch of research.
And if you want to know more about YA and white people with gray hair write YA, at 5 o'clock there is a YA panel as part of the Bookathon. So I hope that you will come around. If you need more of us and other great writers.
Yeah, if you haven't gotten sick of us by the end of this one,
there'll be other people there too.
Yeah. So does this mean it's my turn to ask a question?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. Well, I think one of the things that that came to mind while we were sort of planning for this was like, I've just moved, and I used to live in St. Louis, which is a medium-ish sized city, but it's a city, and we moved to a small town in Illinois, somewhat bigger than Hopewell, but definitely, would feel more middle of nowhere than where I used to be. And I think like the thing that occurred to me was that like 16-year-old me, 17-year-old me would have given anything to get out of this small town, because that's where I was. I was in a small town that was 20 miles from Washington, D.C., but it might as well have been 2,000 miles. That's how it felt. And I wondered, if anybody else had those those sorts of experiences with small town life, or just what were your sort of your personal geographies? Did you go from big town to big city to small town and back again, or where if we followed your map, where would it lead us?
If you followed my map, you'd run out of string. I was born in the UK. I moved a bunch of times in the UK before I came to Canada, and then I lived all over Canada. I didn't get to a city really until I got to Ottawa when I was 17 going on 18 and was starting university. So that was my first brush with anywhere that even had like a queer community at all. But prior to that, I had lived in towns that were, like you, Jeffrey, they were technically a stone throws away from a city, but I can't drive. I will never be allowed to drive. It wasn't like my sister was going to drive me somewhere. So really, I could not get to these places. And because I moved, I never lived anywhere. I didn't go to the same school. It was always new, right? So I didn't have that group of core friends most of the time that they were like, oh, we're going to do a road trip, because one of them usually had a car and somebody else had a part-time job and had enough money for gas. I saw those things happening, but it never included me. Until I got to one small town in British Columbia where I made this amazing group of friends. And that was also where I came out to someone for the first time, a boy I was tutoring in French, of all things. And
Ooh la la.
yeah, oh yeah. And that was an amazing experience in this little tiny nowhere town. And that was one of the first times that anything affirmative came my way about queerness. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to make sure that Hopewell wasn't this horrible place. But because I don't think it is that way all the time. But I completely agree that 16-year-old me wanted to get the hell out of there. Like it didn't matter which small town I lived in. I just wanted to go somewhere where I had options and some control over my own life rather than living with my family. So yeah, I think we all captured that sense and of the characters being like, I just want to start, like I just want something to happen, and then they all get stuck and something else happens instead.
Yeah.
It's a good metaphorical setup we stumbled upon.
Funny how that works.
I moved. I'm the opposite. I didn't need much string. I've moved less than anyone I've ever met. Lived in the same house in the suburbs of Toronto till I was 23. Then moved into a house where I lived into my 30s, and then I was already living with my husband then, and then the two of us bought our house around the corner from that, and that's it. That's all the moves we've done. So I've been from the suburbs of Toronto to downtown Toronto and lived there ever since. I've never felt safe in small towns. I like the anonymity of big cities a lot. I think was true for me as a gay man, true for me as a Jew. It was just like, okay, there's no spotlight on you when you're walking through a city because everyone's got their own things to do, and there's places to go where you can find people like you, and that's felt safer. And that's something I've had to get over in my life. Okay, how can I feel safe in a place where I feel like I've been programmed not to, and I've had good experiences doing that. But and definitely Rome in my book. It's interesting because both Rome, who's from Toronto, and I always do this during panels. I forget my characters' names.
Darcy.
And Darcy, who's from Hopewell, are both people who are a little bit nervous on their feet no matter where they are. And Darcy's actually managed to isolate himself completely in his small town, whereas Rome has his friend group, but then, it's, you see that he also walks around with worry. So cities have always felt comfortable to me. And when we travel, it's mostly to cities. And I love that sense of the crowd. I love being on public transit anywhere. And so yeah, I'm challenging myself by having to write in a small town and have Rome feel, okay, this is okay. I'm surviving here. I'm doing it. And the first day he goes out with makeup on, but then he has a kind of a scary encounter. And the second day he has to decide not to wear makeup, and feels like he's betraying the core of himself by doing that. So those are some of the issues I got to explore there, which are clearly my own fears.
I always go back to a story I told. This is a real life event. When my husband and I were traveling from New Orleans to Houston, which are two wonderful sort of queer positive areas, especially the Montrose in Houston. We stopped to have lunch in Nowhere, Louisiana. And so we get out of the car and we walk into the restaurant. And it was sort of like every stereotype I'd ever heard of and had dismissed because, of course, stereotypes are terrible and awful. And then we looked around, we're like, huh, there are open weapons on the back of lots of trucks and there isn't another car except for ours. And, and so we walked into this restaurant and the woman behind the counter looked at us. And we get this a lot. And actually, normally it annoys the crap out of me. And I'm always correcting people. But she looked at us, she was like, y'all are twins, right? And in the middle of nowhere, Louisiana, we were like, yep, we are twins. We took our food to go and we ate it on the road. We were like, we are not staying here.
Yeah.
And I think that's just reality, right? Like there are times where you're like, no, I'm not risking myself here. And so I think that moment with Rome, and I think Fielding had, I think we all had it with our characters. There's a couple of moments where they're like, like, is this worth being myself or not? And then, they eventually figure out how much of themselves they can be. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. That's just reality of like existing while queer.
Yeah, and
Yeah, that doesn't stop.
actual, yeah. If you have actual safety issues, of course, take care of yourself. But sometimes you say, it would probably be okay to just come out right now. But you know what? That takes more energy than I have right now.
Yes.
And that's fair. It's legitimate either way. There's times when you go, no, someone's phoning you up and saying, does your wife hit my husband? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, like to the point about that feeling of safety. I just always assumed that feeling of safety is an illusion. And I don't know, because I moved around a lot. I grew up in a military family. And so, I was like born in Hawaii, moved to Florida, moved to North Carolina, Maine, Maryland, Arizona, back to Maryland. And that was before high school was over. I was lucky for the most part because we moved at like the natural transition points in schools, like between kindergarten and first grade, between elementary and middle school, and then stayed in the same place for middle school and high school. And so it was always just so weird for me to meet people who had lived in the same house all their lives. I was like, really? What's that like? And most of those places were small and they were, around military installations. And so, it was the 80s. So it was like, I just never saw any option and just wanted to get out, and that idea of like just vanishing into the flow of a city is why I went from where I spent my freshman year in university to which was a campus of like 1,000 students, to the University of Missouri, which had like 25,000 students. And I just thought, even though I had no idea like who else, where to find other queer people, I was just sort of like, this is much better, and I think that there is something to be said for that. Those places make it easier to blend in, and also make it, it seems paradoxical, but it's also easier to find people. Yeah. Oh, someone in the chat, 2 of your cousins are Mizzou alum. Mizzou, rah.
I
have no school spirit.
There are people where there are other outsiders are kind of easy to spot when you're an outsider. It's sort of like you say, oh, okay, I can see you're sending out that same nervous signal. Maybe I can go talk to you, like sidle up to you and hi.
Oh yeah. You learn that second language that just involves like communication across a room by a glance. It's sort of like, oh, fellow traveler, hello.
See, for me, I wore it. That was one of my first sort of lessons in moving around so much when I was a kid, was if there was a t-shirt I could find that had my interest that I could put on my body, that would work, because it would find the other people. Like I cannot tell you how many wonderful people I met because of my Smiths t-shirt. Like, that was like an entry level into that group of people, no matter which school I went to.
And it would probably mean nothing to some rock and roll jocks.
Yeah. And I would try to find things that didn't actually have their name on it, right? Like it would just be the album artwork or that kind of thing. Like just something that was smart. Like, people in the know will understand this. People who are not in the know will just think I'm wearing a weird t-shirt, and that's fine. Yeah.
That's what I did in high school and college. A lot of Doctor Who t-shirts, and it's something that hasn't really gone away. Like there's a reference in Roadside Assistance to a t-shirt. I'm going to read that scene at the YA panel, but it involves this shirt. But the funny thing is, like, there are two versions of this shirt. The silhouette is the Doctor, but this one's the 10th Doctor. There's also a version of this where the silhouette is the 11th Doctor. So that's kind of like how they Lynn and Ed sort of it factors into their their first meeting, although it doesn't go well. But that would be like, if it was, it was either Doctor Who or like my best friend in college, Trisha, was a huge Pet Shop Boys fan. And I got a job at the same bookstore that she worked at. And my first day, I was wearing I'd seen them in concert. And so I was wearing my concert t-shirt, and she looked at it and she just said, "You didn't." And I said, "I did." And she said, "I hate you." And that was the beginning of our wonderful friendship. So yeah, there is something to be said for wearing it.
And I had Fielding do the same in whatever my story's called, Hope Echoes. That's what my story's called. Like he's wearing a Catadora t-shirt. So there's that little scene where Joshua at the diner just turns to him and says, "Oh yeah," he just casually mentions his boyfriend, and there's Fielding having his mind blown, like, why in the world in this small town would this random guy tell me that he has a boyfriend? This is so amazing. And then later he finally asks him, like, "How did you know you could talk to me?" And he's like, "You're wearing a Catadora t-shirt." He's like, "Oh."
I love ways in which our real lives do inform it, because I don't usually wear branded t-shirts, so I was like, it wouldn't have occurred to me.
I had to wear a black or blue collared shirt for all the 20 years I worked at the bookstore. I will never put on another black or blue collared shirt for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I'm working from home, so I've gotten spoiled.
I did wear my Tagame Bara bondage t-shirt at Saints and Sinners one year. Signed by Tagame at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival.
Nice. Okay, we have two. Oh, geez, we have two questions. Okay, I'm been bad. The geography of your experiences is obviously important to all of you, and I can see why Hopewell is a small community. How would you have had to change your outlook if the setting was more of an urban variety? Ooh. Oh, wow. I don't even know if I could have done my story in an urban variety. Like, if I think about it, it was really all about Fielding uncovering something happening in a small town and needing like small town locals to even find his way around. So, man, I would have to have started from the ground up. I really don't know if I could tell the same sort of story if it hadn't been in a small town. I kind of needed it to be. How about you guys?
Yeah, this story is actually sort of the reverse of what I usually do. And usually what, I will start with characters when I'm developing a story, or there's usually like some big what if, and like pretty quickly my process veers into thinking about characters. And so like this one, really involved the place. Like the place was really important here. I think place is important in anything, but in this one, it's really important to the plot that this all happens in this way in this place. And if it were urban, it would just be I would be writing a completely different story.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I mean, I'm just wondering what would happen if Rome actually did grow up in a smaller center like Thunder Bay, like where his grandmother is, and was in Toronto feeling intimidated by the size of Toronto. That could work. And for Darcy's character, it could work if he was coming out of a recent immigrant family and he didn't fit in with them, nor did he feel yet like he fit in Toronto. He hadn't found his people, so he didn't connect to anybody and had to isolate himself in that way as a queer person in a not necessarily accepting community. Yeah, but it's very interesting. You can't separate place from plot. Everything builds into the story.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That was a good question. Thank you for stumping us all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Jerry.
The other question is, we'll answer this one very briefly because I have a feeling this is also one that Aurora is going to ask us later as well. But what we found easiest or toughest, or what we think are the easiest or toughest parts of writing YA. If you want to go first, Jane Marshall.
I've spent a lot of time thinking about what the difference is between YA and just writing a book that has a young protagonist. And at first when I first started writing YA, I was very like, I don't like that. It's some kind of marketer's demographic, or they're just trying to they're making up a genre just so they can place things in bookshelves. But as I wrote it, I think that YA has a bit of a sense of a mission to it. Like, what are the things you actually want to say to people of that age? And in this case, to queer people, to young queer people, what are the things of reassurance? What are the things of, in Dubious Gift of Dragon Blood, for instance, I really wanted to talk about sexuality and want to talk about, before entering into the sexual part of your life, know who you are and believe in who you are, and also the importance of consent. So there was a sense of mission in writing that. And so that's a bit of a different feeling than I would have if I was writing a book for some, where the audience was a general adult audience. I feel a bit like a gay elder saying things to gay youth that I want them to hear. And I try to do that without being a preachy book or anything, to keep everything alive. But that's the place where I, as the writer, step into it in YA.
I think for me, I don't know if it's the trickiest part so much as or the most difficult part, but yeah, I try not to make it sound like, a very special episode of, I try not, I do this in anything. I'm not trying to talk down to anybody when I'm writing, and like, I think that, is there an easy part of it? Is there? Why do we do this? It's yeah. At a certain point, I'm just sort of like, why? There is no why. Or like the
writing isn't easy.
Yeah, but I love it. And I don't think I'm fit for anything else.
I think I could do the why for me, at least, is I want there to be more queer stories for queer younglings to find. So, and I want those stories as much as possible to come from queer people. So that's my why. I'm writing them because I remember what it was like to be a queerling, and how angry I was when I was like 20 something, working at the bookstore, and realized those books existed, but no one would let me have them. They're like, either queer YA existed in like 69 with was it John Donovan? When I get there, it better be worth it. Or Nancy Garden was like 82 with Annie on my mind. Like those books existed, but they just weren't damn well on the bookshelf. They were too busy trying to burn them, and so
And they still are.
and they still are. And it made me
Yeah.
it made me so angry to know that I could have had these damn books when I needed them. So on the why front, that one I do have an answer for. I'm trying to time travel and put books out there that young me would have loved to read.
Time travel.
But the easy part, easy or difficult. I think the hardest part for me is trying to maintain a nebulous now, which is something that Greg Heron introduced me to with mystery writing, where the idea that you would like your book to still feel relevant and current in 5 years or 10 years. But when you're writing YA, holy crap, like young adult language and technology and like socialization. And frankly, especially if you're writing queer YA, like the language they have access to, the labels they know and understand and use, those change so rapidly now, depending especially on where you're writing. So I found that difficult, was to really sort of like drill down to go, okay, if I'm going to use something specific, I'm going to really think about it. Like, do I really want to use, Twitter? Or do I really want to just say social media? Those kind of things. I don't think social media is going away, but who knows? Like maybe we'll get lucky and Twitter will explode. That kind of thing. So I think that's where I struggle was trying to hold on to that nebulous now is difficult, like making something that's going to maybe hopefully stand the test of time. But who knows?
That's really interesting.
Yeah. You have to trust your readers to know that if you've done an emotionally true story, just because they go, oh, he's in MySpace, which if I was taking this back 10 years.
Friendster.
Yeah, if he said that, then it doesn't, a smart reader is not going to invalidate the story completely.
Yeah. And one of the I hadn't really thought of it this way, but the thing that I'm working on now, I'm sort of getting around that by bumping it 85 years into the future. So
one of the best things about writing spec fic is you could just decide that something doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is like, the hazard there is that things are changing so quickly that something you write now could be technology could leapfrog it next week, and you just had no idea.
Yeah, we're rewatching some of the Star Trek: The Next Generations, and anytime they talk about computer processing speed, it's hysterical, right? Like it's just they're talking about like, oh, I can have this many gigabytes of information. Like, ooh, I have that on my phone.
It's like, oh yeah, that's like this. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, my watch. Yeah. Yeah. So, what are you all working on, actually?
Okay, we have 2 minutes left. I see.
Wow. Yep.
I'm just researching a book. Actually, speaking, I'm leapfrogging into the past. I'm researching a book that takes place in Toronto's queer community in 1981. So I'm getting deep into the Canadian Queer Archives right now, which is an amazing both online and in-person thing. Mostly online right now. I'm listening to interviews with gay men who from 1983, who recorded in 1983.
Oh,
and it's going to be something, I don't know if it's actually going to be autofiction, but it's going to be a version of me at 18 having discovered the queer community long before I actually did. So I wanted to get it right.
Oh, very cool.
I'm finishing up a romance novella, and then I am moving on to a new YA project, and it's a scary one because it's a high-low. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but that's a high interest but low reading level. So I've been approached to try to write a book that is accessible for people who aren't necessarily big readers, but is also an interesting queer YA. So it's terrifying, but I'm working on that next. Yep.
Takes a good writer. Yeah.
And you, Jeffrey?
Me? I am working on I'm working on a couple things. But the main one is a YA, and it's about, and it involves sort of time travel, but it's tentatively called The Ghost in You. So, and yes, it's named after the song, which probably won't stand because copyright. Yeah. So, but that's the inspiration.
So I'm going to say thank you because holy crap, we're out of time. So thank
Yep.
you all for coming. Thank you for your lovely questions.
Bye-bye. Nice seeing you guys.
Thank you very much. Bye.